And welcome back, everyone. It's been a little bit since I did a retrospect or review of a season of Death Battle. Want to try to get through all 8 current seasons before March comes, which is plenty of time, admittedly, but still. But we are now on season 4 of Death Battle, and my obvious thoughts on each of the Death Battles that took place. So let us just get to it now, shall we? First up was Laura Croft versus Nathan Drake. And for a season premiere, this was fine. I can't say a lot of the jokes really stood out. Although I think it ended with her taking about the one joke of her analysis ending with her about to take a bath and shooting the camera. I'm like, okay, that was kind of fun. The fight itself really isn't not much of a fight. They struggle for a bit, and then just kind of chasing each other. They kind of interact a bit. The death's pretty decent. The effects are, right. Not one of the best CGI ones. Honestly, for me, it's just kind of a okay fight. It's not anything amazing. For me, it's like a 6.5. Certainly above average, but nothing that amazing. Yeah, I can't say too much on it beyond that. Scrooge McDuck versus Shovel Knight. I'm not gonna lie. It's about the same, but for different reasons. It's pretty wacky. It's just two nonsensical characters really duking it out with each other, but it does have its charm. The Scrooge McDuck analysis is pretty fun. The Shovel Knight one was just kind of whatever. Ultimately, it just came down to the fight, and it was certainly fun, but nothing amazing. So 6.5 out of 10. It just was whatever. So at the moment, it's a pretty lackluster season. And then you give us, not that one, but then you give us Bane versus Venom. And yeah, their analyses were fine, but that was a pretty bad fight. I'm not going to lie. I agree with most people. Seeing Bane hold the gun terribly, by the way, was just, ugh. Them, going toe-to-toe with each other for a bit was okay. And the death is pretty good. Him trying to break Venom's back, only for Venom to skewer him through the knee, is pretty cool. And then him blowing up Bane's head is pretty fun. And I do like the setup, but apparently the setup does drag a little bit. It takes a little bit for the fight to actually get started. It's nowhere near the worst fight they've ever done. It was 4.5 out of 10 for me, not anything great. So it's been a pretty lackluster season up until this point. And then you give us Megazord versus Voltron. That's a top tier fight of any Death Battle season ever. That was just pure on yes. It made sense that they would probably think the others were villains. It's like, wait, you got swords? We got swords. This makes no sense. And then them just going toe-to-toe with each other. I can't remember the name of the crazy crew member Voltron. Get away! That was pretty fun. No! So, and then, them just duking it back and forth for a while. The effects work was great in this. This is one of those fights that stood out in terms of its effects. Or in terms of the animation. This was some good animation. And they had a great analysis too. It was all a good analysis. I can't remember any joke that stood out to me, but it's still 9.5 out of 10 was probably a near perfect episode for me. I think the only thing that really stood out to me that kept it from being a true 10 out of 10 episode was, if I'm not mistaken, I think there may have been one bit in the analysis that didn't quite work for me, but I can't remember offhand what it was, but still, 9.5 out of 10. Loved it. Loved this episode. Natsu versus Ace, not as good by any stretch of the mean, but for what they were doing with the fight and the personality they were showing in there, the effects work, the characterization, I actually had a lot of fun with this. It really did seem to be the kind of fight you'd want to see from these two characters. Their personalities were shining through pretty well. You see the actual big effects they do, the weird techniques they try to, employ against each other. Their analysis were pretty solid as well. it was just a solid episode. A 7.5, like the true definition of well above average, but well below perfect. So yeah. Then you got Glacious versus SubZero. This, on rewatch, this is a pretty bad fight in my opinion. Keep in mind, this is all my opinion. Because I had someone to talk about my opinion on the Tracer versus Scout episode. How I actually pretty much liked it and thought that's how the fight should have gone. Whereas apparently the majority of the community of Deathbattle actually disagreed with the outcome of that fight. So, this fight, maybe I'm in the minority on this fight too. This is not a good fight. I mean, it's not bad, and you definitely get some moments from like the analysis. You get some moments in the fight, but I'm looking back on it now, even after rewatching. I'm like, I don't remember. Nothing really stands out that strong. So for me, it was just meh. It's just a lackluster fight. Ultimately, 3 out of 10. Not by far their worst fight ever, but pretty bad, or pretty just lackluster. So moving on, we had Android 18 versus Captain Marvel. This one usually also gets pretty trashed, from what I understand. It's better than the Glacious versus SubZero fight. I definitely give it that. Their setup made a bit of sense too. That's another thing that always strikes me, is that it needs to have good setup, a reason for, and it needs to be. The characters need to be in character. And while 18 is definitely in character, I feel like Captain Marvel, in both her fights, we'll get to Shazam Captain Marvel later on in the other seasons, but I feel like in both their fights, she's a little too extreme on her end of why because she's the one who starts the fight. That's the thing. Captain Marvel in both her fights is the one who starts the fight. And I frankly I get that she's a hot-headed character. I guess she has an attitude. Trust me, I get that. I've never been a fan of the Captain Marvel character. Take the movies out of the equation. I've never been a fan of the Captain Marvel character. So it makes sense that they use her as the instigator for the fight. But the fact that she just starts crap for no reason in both these fights. And her character just isn't that enjoyable to watch. I think that's part of it, is that she's just not a likable character for me. But other than that, the fight is fine. There's not a lot that goes down that really is amazing. Although I do like the whole, Krillin's laying pipe above his, not as he punching above his weight class, he's laying pipe above his weight class joke, which, let's be honest, Dragon Ball fans, he very much is. He lucked out. He's probably got Bulma's well and good. I do like Bulma's character, but let's be honest. Wife-wise, between the big three, Vegeta, Goku, big four, Vegeta, Goku, Gohan, and Krillin, it's either Gohan or Krillin who lucked out with the wives more than anything else. In terms between personality and what they're capable of doing. Honestly, yeah, I'd probably be a Videl or 18 man myself. Bulma falls into the next tier, but Chi-Chi, no, ain't nobody got time for that. But yeah, this fight's above Glacious versus SubZero, but it's really more like a 4 out of 10, maybe 4.5. I had a 4 out of 10. I think I'll keep it at 4 out of 10. Metal Sonic versus Zero. This is another one in the community that really gets a lot of hate, and I think it's because of the effects work more than anything else. The fight itself is fine. There's nothing wrong with the fight, what's going on in it. But when I watched it, I'm like, okay, now I can kind of see why people kind of rag on this a bit. Because, yeah, the effects work is, wow. They showed they could do CGI well. But the problem is, and I think at this point, this is when they kind of finally, because looking at season 14 is when season 4 is when they settled on the 16 match roster per year. They had only just gotten their schedule fully down. And they honestly, I think they just needed time to adjust to that. Otherwise, it's above average, but only just a 5.5 out of me. There are some good things. I like the chaos control. And then Zero just negating it and just killing Metal Sonic. I was rooting for Metal Sonic in the fight, but whatever. These two are well within character, so that's fine for me. Lucario versus Renamon, believe it or not, isn't as bad as I think some people make it out to be. It's a quick fight. I do think that. I also don't really get the appeal of why they would be fighting, to be honest. Although Renamon being kind of a warrior ninja fox, I guess you could make the argument she's just looking for a challenge. I will say the death is pretty sick. Like that just skewering with the bone club and her, I'm pretty sure they used her as her still struggling and just like then dying on the bone. Like that was pretty brutal. The fight itself, I mean, there's not much to say in terms of our analysis, really. There's not much on either side of the fence for jokes. There's not much in terms of the fight. It was made sense it's going to be a sprite battle. Ultimately, it's fine. I think it's a slightly above average, only because I do think they handled the sprite work pretty well. There's not a lot that's happening in the fight, admittedly, that's like makes it very even. Lucario pretty much, dominated the fight most of it. But still, 5.5 for me. Balrog versus TJ combo. This is another one where it's pretty much a straight near perfect fight. Honestly, despite a little bit of the effects work, particularly for like the background and like the referee and stuff like that, which I know why they do that. The fight looks fantastic. It is tense. For a while, you really don't know who's going to win that fight. They really make it seem like Balrog or TJ could take it for a while until, he goes like, I'm not done. And he's just, and then he just comes in and beats the living hell out of Balrog. Oh my God, that fight is fantastic. And their explanation for the fight too makes 100% why it went the way it went. Made 100% sense. Because they do talk about the whole boxing theory about boxing versus sluggers, all that. And the fact that they would be meeting in the boxing ring makes 100% for a match makes 100% sense for me. Those are like the big three, and they're all within character. Those are the big three things that matter to me: how the fight actually goes and looks, how the setup for the fight is, and how the characters are portrayed. As long as those things are normally met, I don't really have that much of a problem with the fight. Usually, yeah, sometimes a character I want to win doesn't win, but that's all. That's the way it just happens. And like I said, the analysis was great. Like it's a 9 out of 10 fight for me, easy. Shredder versus Super Samurai, not a 9 out of 10 fight, but a good fight. Honestly, it's a pretty good fight. Referencing the original Teenage Mutant Turtles, Ninja Turtles movie, is pretty fun. Particularly like you get Super Shredder beaten by wood and all that, and a rat, and like I like that. Silver Samurais had a pretty good analysis as well. The fight is also pretty sound. Like I was rooting for the Shredder the whole time. That was me. And I was right to be rooting for him, admittedly, because he's more than just a samurai. He's a ninja. He's basically he's a warlord almost. So I definitely agreed with their decision. And the fight, I think, is pretty good. It does get a little weird in terms of like the Super Shredder stuff, but that is what it is. I can't really judge them for just doing what they were doing in terms of analysis. So 7.5 out of 10 for me. Smokey the Bear versus McGruff the Crime Dog. I mean, I think it wasn't their first pure animated fight, if I'm not mistaken. No, because we had Sonic versus Mario, I think, at that point, right? That came in the next season. Actually, I think, I'm thinking on this really quick, this was the first true, like, actual hand-drawn animated one they did. They were introducing hand-drawn animated stuff a little bit here and there in the series, but this is one that was just pure hand-drawn animation at this point. And like for hand-drawn animation, it looks nice. The fight gets kind of fun. You have to understand the type of fight it is. So because of the type of fight it is, I actually quite like it, just being these two joking characters. We would get later versions of these types of fights, which would be like Macho Man and Kool-Aid Man, which we'll talk about for season 8 when we talk about season 8. But for me, this is kind of like just a 7 out of 10 fight. Nowhere near perfect. Like this is not a 10 out of 10 episode. No. But for me anyway, I'm like, I enjoyed myself, especially rewatching it, especially when you talk about the analysis. Because of the types of characters they are, it allows for some fun jokes. At least that's how I felt. But anyway, yeah, I go 7 out of 10 for McGruff versus Smokey. Thor versus Wonder Woman. Now, Thor versus Wonder Woman, I want to like it more than I do. There are some effects issues. Like some of the CGI doesn't work. I also feel like their analysis of Thor might have been a bit off. I feel like because Wonder Woman was coming out, they leaned more towards Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman's only ever lost one fight for all the 3 fights she's currently been in. She's beaten She-Ra, she's beaten Thor, and she lost to Rogue. Now, when you hear that, admittedly, Rogue was season 1, like I think their 3rd episode, but when you hear that, that doesn't quite make sense, does it? And I think they kind of, especially with later comics of Thor, kind of nerfed Thor a bit. I think a lot of people actually agree they kind of nerfed Thor a little bit in this fight. And honestly, the fight just didn't make sense. It didn't make sense why they were fighting. Like, he just shows up on Themyscira and they start fighting. Yes, he's a man and they're not allowed to be on Themyscira, but that rule, especially with comics, there's been many exceptions to that. Batman and Superman are men who are allowed on Themyscira. So, I mean, there's an exception right there to the rule. Steve Trevor was another one who, even though he wasn't supposed to be there, they accommodated him. So, and he's Thor, the god of thunder. I mean, you think that maybe some exceptions could be made or she would be less inclined. I don't know why exactly they went the way they did. The fight itself, frankly, isn't that impressive either. Wonder Woman is kind of dominating the fight until, I mean, Thor definitely gets his hits in, but there's nothing that's really implying that Thor is winning the fight. Even when he goes into like his madness, it's really not looking like he's going to win the fight because it's clear that by that point Wonder Woman was going to win it. Both of them had, especially when they talk about removing the bracelets and all that, and she had to remove her gauntlets. So, frankly, I don't hate the fight. It's a 6.5 out of 10. It's above average. I didn't mind watching it because the animation's pretty good. But, yeah, it is what it is. Now, Naruto versus Ichigo. Now, this, when we talk about this season 8 fight, Madara versus Aizen, this to me is one of those fights that is a perfect illustration of the person I thought would win and still think actually wins didn't win. My money, it was on Ichigo. And I still believe that. And when we get to the Madara versus Aizen fight, you're going to hear me talk about this more, because I don't want to turn that into a debunk video, but I might go a little bit more off in tangent about it. But I think Deathbattle has a fundamental misunderstanding about how the world of Bleach actually works in terms of how the power structure works. Because Ichigo, I think just on the sheer power level, he dwarfs Naruto. I think that's the case. And even though he lacks a lot of finite abilities, that level of power, speed, all that, I think we should more than make up the difference. But I bring this up to say that I do not hate this episode in the least. I very much enjoyed this episode, despite the fact that that Ichigo won and that Naruto won and Ichigo lost. I very much enjoy it. Rewatching it, I can see why there's some like issues people have, like color saturation, some animation issues. The reason they're fighting admittedly is kind of stupid as well. But take that out of the equation. In fight, they're within character. The fight itself is a lot of fun. And their analysis, again, despite the fact I don't think they quite get the world of Bleach, they quite seem to understand how the world of Bleach actually works. Despite that, I still very much like the analysis between the two of them. Naruto's is pretty in-depth. Ichigo's is definitely a little more not overshadowed. It's glossed over a bit more than Naruto's, because the stats you can get from Ichigo, as they admittedly say, are a little bit harder to derive from, what we have available. But still, I think the fight, despite some animation, not even animation, some editing coloration issues, like when Kurama's avatar shows up, you barely are able to see it. There's some saturation, like particularly with like Kurama mode or Chakra or Getsugas and stuff like that. That looks a bit off. But overall, I still think it's a very solid fight. I do think it, and I put it at a 7 out of 10. Batman Beyond versus Spider-Man 2099. Honestly, this is actually a pretty good, pretty okay fight in my opinion. It's not amazing. It's like I put it at about a 6 out of 10. The reason for that is it does seem a bit out of character for Bruce to be like, that's one way to do it. It's like, well, you killed a man. Like, what? Like, for death battles, I kind of forgive the characters who have no kill rules. Because that's obviously something that they aren't going to be able to, aren't going to be able to, uphold in these things. So I do forgive the whole no kill rules, then allowing them to kill thing. But I do like some of the bits. I like them struggling. I like how Terry actually does kill him and overwhelm him. And I like the fact that he does have Bruce there. I do like that. However, I mean, a lot of it is just kind of like striking back and forth. Their fight, the reason they fight, I guess, is logical enough, but it's less than perfect, and it looks fine. It does. I like the actual animation they have for Old Man Bruce. So there's that, definitely. So that's what I have to say about that. Last but not least, the season finale was Sephiroth versus Virgil. Now this again, not a perfect fight. It's certainly one of their better ones. Their analysis are all good. The explanation on why Virgil lost made sense. Like I never played a lot of Devil May Cry or Final Fantasy, so to be fair, my opinion on that is minimal at best. But I mean, the effects work is good. The actual fight itself is pretty impressive. I think it's not one of their greatest fights, mind you, but it's still a damn good fight in my opinion. We'll get to some fights that are not damn good later on, but still, in terms of two characters that make sense for a season finale, these two make sense. And in terms of like what we got as the fight went on and just how it ended, I thought that was a solid fight. It's just a solid season finale, 8 out of 10 for me. So to average that out, that means that season 4 had a 6.4, at least for my grading, 6.4 out of 10 rating, which puts it above season 3 by about 0.2. It does not, however, put it above season 2, which has 6.8, and does not put it above, it actually ties it with season 1 at 6.4. So, yeah, at the moment, like, they were able, so far for me, season 2 on average was the best season. Now, little spoilers, it doesn't stay that way. But, yeah, at this point in time, that's what it was. Season 1 was the best average rated season. In terms of the worst episode, that probably came down to who was it? It was SubZero versus Glacious. That wasn't a very good episode. And the best episode for me was the Power Rangers Megazord versus Voltron. So yeah, that's my thoughts on season 4 of Death Battle. We'll be back, or I'll be back at some point before the beginning of next season with my season 5 and 6 and 7 and 8. And then hopefully I will do a quick winners and losers tournament for season 8. Till then, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you next time.